career that really doesn't sit well with them. And it's because they haven't taken the time, first of all, to understand their own values. What is important to you? What's a non-negotiable? And for everyone, that's really different. It's not a one-size-fits-all. For some people, it's being able to be there and dedicate the time to their family. For some people, it's I need to, hopefully for most of you, keep Sundays free. For some people, it is, making sure they have independence. Some people want to be, impactful. They want to have flexibility. So there's so many things you've got to decide before you start looking. What's my non-negotiables? In line with my value, in line with my life outside of work. What do I need this to look like? Because otherwise you start to get blinded by the lights and the glitter of certain things, but you need to take yourself back to, hang on a sec, however shiny this looks, I said that these were my core values, so if it's not in line with that, I can't compromise on them. You'll make sure then you find yourself in a place that is actually going to be right for you, amen? By the way, there are, as I said before, there's loads of industry specialists in different fields, so Pastor Iris, Pastor Martin, Pastor Afi, feel free to chip in at any point with any extra bits that you want to come in, because we can all learn from each other. So next, when you're picking a career or a job focus, you've then got to start doing research. Now, some people like research, some don't. To get involved, but as a way, yeah, if you want to sit down, that's the app you're worried about. Okay, so yeah, research the fields. And I remember as a teenager to African parents. There's no shade, I love my parents, they were great actually because they got us really thinking. But there's 3 or 4 career paths I know of. Engineer, doctor, lawyer. It's that's and they are great careers, but it's not everybody's calling either, right? So you need to do your research. You need to know what it is out there, because now with what I do, the amount of careers I trip across, and I'm like, who even knew? Who even knew that was a thing? Goodness me, that's so exciting. Oh my gosh, they're very well paid. You don't know. So you've got to research to really just start and explore. There's a few sites that I've put on there, and I will send some of these round to you guys, okay, so you can access them. But there's some websites, particularly for the young ones, that are really useful. So Prospects website is great. Particularly when you're in school, I'd say it's brilliant, because what it does is it tells you what the different career paths and stuff are, but it also tells you typically what training and qualifications and things like that you might need, so you can actually set yourself on the path for that. Versus, and if you need to pivot, which we'll talk about later, that's all fine. As Pastor said today, 60 is not the end of your life, there's more to come. So there's a lot of people who actually have different callings at multiple points or different points in their life. However, if you can take the time to really think and something resonates with you when you're earlier, it's a bit simpler then to be able to start on that path. There's also a website which we'll come on to some of this, but not going to uni.co.uk. Look, again, parents, don't come for me. It's not everyone's portion to go to uni. It's not everybody's, and that's okay. But what you need to do is make sure you have a plan, because not going to uni and then not having a career plan either, it doesn't leave you anywhere. So you need to make sure that if you're not going to uni, it's for a specific reason, and then finding out what career paths and routes there are that you can get on. Because I have some friends who were really smart, well advanced at our young age of 16, 17, and they were like, I'm not going to uni, I don't need debt. And I was like, okay, fine, whatever, I'm going to uni because my mom said I have to. But what they did is they joined school leavers programs, and for big businesses like KPMG. So they are trained accountants. We were all paying our student debt, and they were trained accountants from a big law firm, big financial firm, while we were all trying to get first jobs, and they were assistant managers. So, there are some real great career paths which don't necessarily require uni, but you've just got to do your research and make sure that you're thinking about, with everything that we spoke about before, what's important to you, what aligns to you, know what options you've got, because that will start to help you narrow it down. And I'd say when you research, also look into broader job families, not just specific job titles, because if you're too narrow, you might not realise there's something that's quite similar but a bit broader that you like. So on examples in there, but you look at healthcare, it might not be that you are meant to be a nurse, but you're meant to work in the healthcare field. So look at different roles that are there, just to make sure you're not narrowing. Again, you don't know what you don't know. So you've got to give yourself a bit of a broader search, and then once you find a few things you like, then you narrow in. Technology is great. So like back in the day, we'd have to do loads of, find some papers, some journals, go on specific websites. And there's a YouTube for everything these days. So if you're not sure, start YouTubing some of the day in the lives of. There's loads of things out there. Really get a feel from people who are in that industry, in that profession, what it actually means. I will explain that. It's a good point. So a day in the life of, there are a lot of people who will give their very real life experience to explain day to day what their job entails. So giving you an example, there might be someone who has writes an article or does a YouTube channel and they're explaining what their job is. People see, I'll use dentists as an example. People see dentists and they're like, oh, dentist, oh wow, oh, dentist, it's a prestigious role. But people don't actually focus on what the job entails and day-to-day what it's like. So you might have dentists, and there are a lot of dentists actually out there that do things like this, and they talk about what their job entails every single day. So this is the sort of time I wake up, this is the amount of patients I see, this is what training I had to do to get there, these are the things that I'm challenged to do by my employer, this is what's difficult, this is what I enjoy. So you can get some second-hand information from someone who is living the job, which will put it into context, because there's some people, let's say, who really enjoy sales elements, but it's not for everybody. And actually, if you some of the dentists now will say we have to do a sales element of our job now, because if we're working for a practice or what have you, they want us to sell certain solutions and services and what have you. So if people are to do with sales and then they end up hearing that that's part of it, you might be like, that rules it out for me. But that's not necessarily on a job spec, but someone who's doing the job and in the industry will tell you really clearly, this is actually what our day-to-day looks like. Is that clear for everybody? Does anyone have any questions on that? Perfect. And then again, just to get that exposure, it's the career fairs, the networking, the webinars. Do what you can to tap into different networks, because when you just meet people and talk, you're going to get a reality of what it's like. But also, I'm a real big fan of using your personal networks. We see it all the time. You see people going on and they're calling them Nepo babies, and they only got that job because their dad's so-and-so. Well, let's use our own networks. Let's make sure we're supporting each other. And so if you know somebody who is even a friend of a friend of a friend in somewhere, ask, do you think they'd mind having a conversation with me? Or ask your friends or your family or people in church, do you know anyone that's in this field that I might be able to speak to or get some conversation with, or get, in this day and age, it makes such a big difference. And I think, when Grace gave her testimony about the job that she's in, one of the things that she did was she'd messaged somebody on LinkedIn who'd had a similar route to her. She didn't know her at all, but she just was like, oh, I'm trying to break into the industry that you're in, if you have time, would you mind giving me anything? And the girl was graduate, yeah, let's jump on a team. So she started telling her, these are the ways you apply, these are the things I'm looking for. There are people out there that want to help, so really try and expand your network, and any work experience you can get is useful, whether it's voluntary, whether it's 1 day, 2 days, 4 weeks, whatever it is. It's something else that can give you an edge, but also, I think, give you a bit more clarity of, is this something that I want to do? So the next thing then is to evaluate and set the criteria, because I think as you start to learn, all of this will be a bit of an exploration. You'll always be like, okay, that's definitely not for me, this is a maybe play, or this is a very possible. So then you've just got to be asking yourself certain questions to make sure that you're filtering through those decisions accordingly. So, which roles align with your skills and growth potential. So obviously, there's going to be some roles you'll look at, particularly if you're starting your career, where you don't currently have all of the skills, but you know that you have the potential, or, you're shining in an area in school or college, and you're like, actually, this is in line with that. Things that meet your financial needs and lifestyle, because it is important to feel like you're paid a fair wage or a good wage for what you're doing. We shouldn't be comfortable just settling. We want to make sure that if we're giving our best, which we all do, giving our best to an employer, that they're giving us their best as well. So there will be some career paths that will be capped financially. So that's also something to figure out. Like anything that is governmental, or let's say NHS, they'll have bandings and what have you, so certain role types would fit within certain bandings. So I would encourage you to look at that, because again, if you know you've already got, you know, a rent or a mortgage and XYZ, and you know you need to earn a certain amount, and I'm not saying don't do certain paths, but I remember speaking to, I think it was Martha, about different things that you can do to make sure then that you're supplementing, so that you can still do what you're passionate about, but you're also maintaining the lifestyle that you need. So it's really important to have that in the back of your mind, and also do the research on where it sits financially. Important thing that we mentioned, does it fit your values and interests? So, you know, what good is it if we gain the world and lose our souls? So we want to make sure that our values are met in the roles and careers that we go through to. And then future stability and opportunities. You know, no pastor's spoken about it, his career in cyber security. There are some careers that are like completely on the up, and career paths that are on the up. So really look into that when you're doing your research as well. Like, what's a growing field, what's a growing sector, what's a growing industry? Because if you were to choose something that is a diminishing in industry, you might in a few years' time find yourself in a difficult situation, because those skills aren't as highly sought after. Whereas there are some that are really on the up in terms of with the way certain technology is going, or the way that the economy is going, will be a benefit and an asset for, you know, decades to come. So really think about that as well in making sure you're future-proofing your career path. And then there's a few other things that we'll come on to on that bit, but one thing to remember is that you've got to actually you can't do everything at once. You need to actually whittle it down to something. Get yourself then a bit of a focus, because if you're like, oh, I like these, you're like, where do you start? So, you know, going back to that job family thing, you might think, okay, I like 1, 2, 3, great, but you can't have a never-ending list. At some point, you've got to narrow it down. Otherwise, your search will be so fractured, and when you come to interviews, you'll be trying to wear too many hats. You won't necessarily give it your best self. So really do narrow it down. So there's loads of different ways that you can start your job search. So, you know, for social media is great, but LinkedIn is the career social media, if you like. There's so much on there now, like businesses will advertise on there. You can actually look into the companies, see what trends they have, what types of people work there, like, and then it will help you. But there's an actual job section on LinkedIn as well. So you can search on there for jobs. Networking online, so we're talking about, you know, what the example of what Grace did, but then also job boards. Job boards can be a bit of a minefield, so you need to have a look and see whether there are any like industry-specific job boards, ones that focus on the area that you've now narrowed down to. But you could just have a bit of a broad approach and just have a look and see what's out there, and it'll help you in some of your focal points. A direct company website, so we'll say, if you know there's a company that you want to work for, and we were talking about this earlier, there are some businesses that are renowned for, let's say, supporting people who need sponsorship or need visas or things like that. So if you know actually there's 5 businesses in the local area that are, you know, renowned for doing that, and also they have the sort of jobs and the industry that I'm interested in, then you can set up searches to specifically look at those businesses to support you in that. Or if you know there are some businesses that are renowned for supporting people with further education, and you're like, I want to go down the education route, but I want to learn and work, there are businesses that are renowned for that. So once you start to compile a bit of a list of businesses that are known for doing those things, then you can stay on top of those businesses specifically. Personal networks, I would say. There's so many things that sort of fly around in conversations. And I remember the saying, which like used to be quite negative, but I think now we can spin it on as a positive. Like, you know, most of the big deals are made on the golf course. And you think about all these guys that are in their networks having a chat and what have you, and these big deals are going on. We need to get ourselves on that golf course. Now, metaphorically speaking, because I'm not playing golf, but you know, we need to find ourselves in the room where those sorts of conversations are happening, so that we can be like, I'd be great, or I know somebody who'd be great for that. So we've got to think about how we expand our personal networks, surround ourselves with people in the position to drive influence, to open doors. Recruitment agencies. So honestly, it depends on what you're looking for. There are some that have dedicated specialist agencies, but if you know that you are, particularly if you're like a second, third jobber, there's an industry that you want to, there will be some agencies that are specifically just focused on those areas. So they might have like insight into roles that aren't actually advertised out there. So I have like key clients that would come to me and be like, right, in 2 months' time, we're expanding our team. Can you just start to have a look out for me at this sort of skill set? So I'd have like a handful of people who I know, who I've met, and I know they'd really like this. So I would encourage you to, once you've narrowed down what field you're into, like, and recruitment services are free for prospective hires. The company pays to hire somebody, so it's no cost to you. So you'll be able to have a chat, if nothing else, because they have market insights for you. They'll be able to give you a bit of a steer. But what I would say is just be mindful of what agency you join, because some of them are better than others. Some of them are more ethical than others. So you've just got to make sure that it's one that's reputable. You might want to ask, friends or people in industry, and which would you use? Could you recommend one? So that you've got, whilst you can still also keep doing your own search, you've got them, with eyes and ears to the ground in the room that you might not be in, also potentially giving you a bit of a head start. And you could just start to put some feelers out. Again, you don't want a scattergun approach. I'd never advise that. Don't apply for every single role that pops up. But I would almost rather that than like apply for one job every 4 months, because that's not going to get you where you need to. Once you've decided you're looking, you need to have a concerted effort. And right, these are the types of businesses, and you can set up alerts. You can set up alerts on Google, you can set up job alerts, so it puts the criteria of the things you know you're looking for, and you'll get an inbound email when those things come up. So it makes it really simple to stay on top of what's coming. And we'll get onto in a bit, like how to frame CVs and that sort of stuff, but then you're like, right, I'll read this, I'll make sure I understand what this is, do I need to tweak my CV accordingly? So you are ahead of the curve with that. And businesses now, there's a lot of businesses that are doing apprenticeships and youth development programs. So I'd really encourage you to look at some of those, because it's a way of getting training and development without necessarily having to pay big costs. So there's a charity actually that we partner with, it's called LTSB, and it stands for Leadership Through Sport and Business. And what they do is they'll support some of the youth from different demographics that aren't going to uni but are still very bright and are looking for an opportunity to get involved in certain businesses. They'll give them some career, and it's all free. They'll give them some career training. So I'm one of the people who will come and support the guys with their CVs and interview technique and all these things to help them be ready for the workforce. So really capitalise on the opportunities that you've got, because there are a lot of different ways. It will help you start to shape, what am I looking for, how am I going about it, and bring a bit of a narrowed down approach to you finding the right career. So we were talking about this, we were talking about AI, and we've kind of mentioned, so we've got an interface. So my sister-in-law is, she's a tech specialist, so she put some of these bits together for me, and how to use AI effectively in job searching, because there's a really good way to use it, so it supports you. Just to caveat, we'll caveat a few times, you can't rely solely on AI, but it can help streamline your process. So, it helps you find jobs faster, it can help you create a better CV, covering letter, it can also help you get interview ready. So these are the effective ways to use AI in your job search. And God's delivering me. I'm a naturally impatient person, so anything that is efficient and saves me time, I'm in for. And particularly when you want so many different things that you do in your job search as well as in your own life, trying to get there as effectively as possible is important. So it will save time. It gives you a bit of a starting point, because sometimes it is a bit like, there's so much info. So it can help you have a bit of a start before you get ingrained. And it can improve the quality, because I'm sure Pastor Affy will talk about it, with students. There's a good way to use AI and a bad way to use AI, and those that are using it well, it's like you've got a good start and base, but it can help you fine-tune and tweak just to, finesse things like structure or reframe wording and that sort of thing. So it can really help you, particularly if that's an area that you don't feel as confident in. You'll start to get a feel for, this is the way, and build almost your way of forming certain things so that you are more comfortable and confident on your own. And then it can give you an edge, because I think technology it's here to stay. So being comfortable with technology and how to use it will become applicable in a lot of job settings. So, showing that you can use that in an effective way in a working capacity, I think will only bode you well. So, applications, where do you start? And we've touched on a little bit of it, but it's broader than what we've just talked about. So, one thing, Terrell, I love this, that Brother Roger put in, before you start, you just need to be resilient, because as much as it is frustrating sometimes not having things go your way, and sometimes you might not get feedback from every application you make, you've just got to keep persisting. You can't get disheartened, and it's easy to do, and it's no judgment on anybody, but if you don't apply, you're not going to get anywhere. So you've got to, even if you're frustrated, just keep it up. Even if you interview and you don't get the feedback that you wanted, just keep it up, because there's a learning opportunity in everything. So just make sure that you ask for feedback and you can use that. But if you're getting, putting loads of applications out there and you're not getting a response, you can also contact them and say, look, I understand I may not have been successful for this role, but it'd be really great to get some feedback as to why I wasn't. Because there'll be things there that you can use later, but just don't give up, be persistent. It's not easy for most people, but it's absolutely achievable. So stay focused, stay on it. So we've touched a bit on that research element, so make sure that you've done your research, but once you've narrowed it down, also do your research on the companies specifically. So you see a job that you like, also research the company. The job could be great, but the environment could be horrible, right? So, you've got to make sure it's both a job and a company that you're interested in. And then start to narrow them down. And you might do this in cycles. So you might be like, okay, I'm having a bit of a job sprint, and I'm going to look at there's 5 roles that I've seen. I'm going to just go through them all, or 10 roles I've seen, I'm going to go through them all. I'm going to choose 5 I'm going to apply for, or I'm going to look at, and then I'm just going to start really assessing myself against criteria, because that's something you've got to be realistic about. A job looks really great, but you've also got to think, okay, how do I look as a prospective hire? And it's not to say at that point you get disheartened, it's saying you then think, right, I need to bolster my CV, and we're not saying make anything up, people. I need to bolster my CV to make sure the right things shine through, or I need to demonstrate I've got aptitude in areas that I don't yet have experience to maximise my chance of actually getting an interview or a conversation. So, when you tweak your CV and your socials, make sure it's in with the view of, I know these people are going to look at that, and I've got to make sure even from that initial CV stage, they see me as a good fit for that job. And then apply, because you can't overthink it too much. You can't spend weeks and weeks going over the same job ad, because before you know it, you're going to be interviewed 5 people and already offered somebody. So you've got to try and do it in cycles of, I've seen a few ads, let me bolster, have a look, and then get those applications out so that you give yourself a chance of being involved and included. So AI and job descriptions. This is what's quite useful actually. So has anyone actually used AI in a job search at all? Yeah? Fab. How did you find it? Barclays, you go. How did you find it?
Very quick, easy,
Yeah.
and detailed than expected.
Nice. What did you use it for?
I used it to check the job market, to be aware of what the going rate in my field is, and what the potential of my work is.
AI's listening to us. Sorry, carry on.
And then what the potential of the future of my role will be like with AI.
Yeah, there's so many good things you can use it for. And that's a great example of making sure, because again, if you're new to an industry or a sector, you're not actually sure if is this salary fair? Is it commensurate? Because you can trawl loads of other ads, but sometimes that's a bit tiring, You can ask AI, what's the going rate for a role of this level in this industry, in this area? I think it's also to put the geography in there is important, because, see, London will be different to the Midlands, and if you're looking in the Midlands, you've got to make sure it's relevant. But yeah, that's a great thing. And then love that, because we mentioned before, what's the future in this industry? It can help you in your research and thinking, is this a long-term career? Will it give me prospects beyond this, 2, 3, 4 years? But you can also use it for job descriptions. So, there's loads, and particularly if you're applying for quite a few things, there's loads of context to read. someone who writes a lot of job adverts. So we when we recruit for businesses, we'll also put together their job adverts and sometimes their job specs. There'll be some bits that are like generic, right, bits. And what you want is to cut through the noise and get to the key elements, and AI can help you with that. So you can ask AI to summarise the job spec for you or an advert into like manageable bullet points. So you can give it the format in which you want that to present it back to you, but then also make sure you are focusing on the key elements, so things like responsibilities, requirements, benefits, as Barkweza was saying, the things you care most about when job hunting. Get it to strip those bits out so you can cut through the noise and get the key elements. Because some bits you can lose in scanning, and also if you're looking at loads, then it comes a bit of a muchness. But it can help you then when you're categorising and shortlisting your jobs. This one was this one was this. You can have those 3, 4, 5 bullet points for each one, so that when you're applying, almost like I know in my head which one's my preference, I know which ones I'm going to focus on. But just remember to have those key points to hand and use them in prioritising, then also the next stages. So here's a bit of an example of a prompt you could do just for context. So like if you were, we're just pretending at the moment we are plugging this into either ChatGPT or any other available AI they might use. So you can paste a copy of the job spec or the job advert, the text of the job advert, to summarise for you in like 3 clear sentences using bullet points, and list the things that you want it to tell you. So then it will draw out that info. So you've then got something that's a little bit more easy to dissect. Because I like words on a page, and people usually ask me, can you read this? And I'm like, yeah. Still reading, yeah. It takes me a long time to read through things, but if I can get it in bullet points, I'm like, bam, I can take it in. So sometimes it's just a helpful way for you to be able to make sure you don't miss anything that's important, that would actually rule it out for you, or that would make it like spot on for you. Any questions on any of that, by the way? Because I know I talk really fast. Loads of info, but I'll send bits round so people have things to look at afterwards. So CV content then, and there's 2 slides, they're quite similar, but we'll focus first on experience, because if you've got experience, it'll be a slightly different format that you might use. But we were talking about, there's loads of different formats of CVs that you can do. I would give people some general tips on the fact that it should not be like War and Peace, particularly if you haven't got a long career. It shouldn't be like loads and loads of pages, because people aren't going to get through it. However, I would also say if you have got a long career, don't make it too short. It's not France. We don't need a 1-page resume. There are sometimes businesses might want a profile and ask for that, so that's fine. It will just be a bullet point in summary, but in most instances you need to give enough so you can get across some of the key elements. So number 1, it sounds fundamental, but the amount of CVs that I've seen submitted that don't have any contact details on. If you're great for the job, how am I going to get in touch with you? So you need to make sure that you've got contact details on, that they're correct, because also, sometimes they're not. For those who are younger, not even necessarily younger, make sure your email address is like appropriate. Not like, I'm gonna out. So I'm not gonna say who actually. They're not in this room. Don't worry anyway. But I know somebody who has an email address from like years ago, and I only just registered what it meant, and it's like j'adore CB, and I was like, is this like when you were a teenager and you were obsessed with Chris Brown? Yes, it is. So I was like, girl, you better change that email address. And I was like, things like that, you need it to be professional. So just include your first and last name in whatever format makes sense. But everything from that CV submissions stage, imagine it's an interview. Because you don't want to give anything that's going to make them think this person's unserious. So it's really easy, and if you haven't done it before, you can create an alias, like in Outlook, you can create an alias that's linked to your main account, so you don't even need to set up a brand new account. You can just set up a new email so they all go to the same thing. So if anyone needs help doing that, I'll show you how to do it, but it's really easy. So you can just make sure that that's the email you use for official things. A profile, I think it's really important to have a bit of a summary of what you're like as a person, but also your inspirations and aspirations. Because for instance, if you are applying for a job which is a customer service role, and you are saying in the first line of the profile, like, passionate about effective and excellent customer service, like instantly they're like, okay, we're on the right lines here. But if your profile's just general and like, I like doing things with my friends and that sort of stuff, that's not impactful. So you've really got to include some aspirational bits that are in line with what you're applying for, because every single paragraph is an opportunity for you to sell yourself. With career history, and I think a few people have different ways of doing this, but I would always start with your most recent role first, because sometimes people get confused. If you start in the role that you had in 1999, they might think this person's inexperienced for the role, and the amount of times people's CVs have been overlooked because it was the other way around. So the most recent role first, and then move backwards in time, because that's the bit you're going to speak about most, because it's most likely the most relevant bit for what you're applying for. And then have bullet points underneath that. So we'll talk a little bit more about the format later, but then you can get into what that role entailed, what the company did, what your achievements, etc. And then education and skills. Now, if education and skills are fundamental to the job, you might put that nearer the start. But I think if you've already been working in that career, it's a bit of an assume, so you can put it later down the bottom. In terms of skills, again, there are some generic skills that are always good to put on there, like excellent communication and blah, blah, blah. But think about what are the skills for that job, what are the skills for that industry, what are the skills for that, that this person that's going to read it that's going to really jump out and say that I'm right for this job. And then some personal interests and achievements. Now, again, just be mindful, it's still going to land on someone's desk, right? So be selective about what that is. But again, something that's going to exemplify the type of person they would hire. So things that are on there that often bode well in working life is that if you're involved in a sport or something physical, it shows that that you're a driven individual, that you can work as a team if it's a team sport. So things like that are always good to add on there. And then things like, let's say if you have a real passion for music and you've performed in certain areas and certain stages, it just shows a bit of the human side. Because actually I think everybody wants to hire somebody that ideally has a bit of a presence and a character about them. Now, of course, you need to be able to do the job. However, people also want to hire someone that they think is going to contribute to the culture of their business. So, try and think about those elements of your personal life as well that would translate that you are, a good hire for that prospective client. So, we aren't machines, we aren't AI. So show your human side, make sure there's a bit in there and sprinkle it in. So some of these are the same. I think the key thing for if you've got limited experience or if it's your first job, you'd probably put your key skills nearer the front, because that's what you're trading off there. Like, what transferable skills have I got? And then you can put in education, training, working experience underneath that to show that, it's aligned or useful or in keeping. But the majority, I would say, would be the same. It's just that flip on. Your career work experience might be lighter. So you can maybe bolster your skills so they're seeing, this transferable skills element there before they go into that. Any questions on any of that? No? Go on. That's a very good point. Yeah. No, that's a brilliant point, and it's not always a given. You're right. There's sometimes some things that aren't going to show in the right. Again, we're not saying make anything up, but you don't have to put everything on there either. So, you're not misrepresenting yourself, because you're still putting true info, but there'll be some things that you don't have to put on there. And also, I think some things, particularly earlier up in your career, that become less relevant. Because when you're in your career profession, like no one actually cares at that point about your GCSE and A-levels. They're more interested in your experience. So it becomes less relevant there. But obviously, if you're something that is in the start, it becomes a lot more relevant. So yeah, absolutely, tailor it, put your best foot forward, highlight the key elements, the best elements, and make sure that they are really visible. So thank you for that. So with CV formatting, I'd say bullet points is always a win. You don't want a CV with prose and war and peace. If it's someone like me reading it, they're going to be like, I can't take any of this in. But again, it gives an opportunity for the key bits to really jump out, for nothing to get missed. And I would frame it in a way that is so clear that no one can miss that. So I would have the date, the company name, the role title at the top of every single role that you have, and then go into it, responsibilities and achievements. Make it so clear. And with those responsibilities, again, be mindful of those. You're selling what you do, so put some thought into that. Make sure it's not just all the mediocre things of the day-to-day, but the extra bits as well that you've either taken on as because you've wanted to shine, or just because you've had the aptitude. But then with achievements, I would also say, try, if you can, include something that's tangible and results figured. So the things that businesses will always like to see is anything that saved time, anything that saved money, anything that's improved efficiency. So, and people, I think sometimes when you're like writing about yourself, it's a bit uncomfortable. You're like, oh, I feel like I'm boasting about it. But you've got to do it because this is the chance that you've got to show them what you're capable of. So even if you've run an initiative, because I remember, so the second job I had, I remember putting on there that I had run a project in the council for like paying grading and stuff. And I actually had done it. And it came up in my interview and I was thinking, I didn't even know whether to include that or not. And I was like, do you know what? I'm glad I did. So you've got to think about what's going to make me stand out. Every business will have multiple applications to their job. So you've got to think, how can I stand out? So if you've got something that demonstrates that you've impacted that business, get it on your CV. Make sure you're giving yourself a chance to shine. Okay. So any questions about CVs? We're moving on to interviews now. No, great. Okay. So interview prep. So again, we can use our good friend AI, any of those to help us with the research element as well. There are some things you can, go on. Yeah. Yeah, I think if they are, so if you have a few job families that you're genuinely interested in, then absolutely. If they are not like for like, you need to make sure that that personal statement, that profile is relevant to that job you're applying for. Because it is very evident when someone's sending in a generic CV to different industries, you won't actually showcase that you might be interested in 3 things, but they just need to know you're interested in their one thing, right? So don't be like, I would look at jobs in XYZ, you're applying for retail and you're talking about liking, telephone customer service. They're like, well, you're not really that interested in us, are you? So narrow it down to the job families that you're recruiting and make sure, because some people do have like template 3 CVs, and they have it saved as, so they know this is my customer service CV, this is my retail CV, this is my project manager CV, whatever it is, so that you are putting forward something that is specific. That's a very good question, Nathan, and yes, make sure that it's specific to that industry job family that you're recruiting for, because it's quite obvious when it's a generic kind of overview. Sorry, we're still on that slide. So research the company. So there's loads of stuff. Like I do this now. I was doing a training session at work, and I was asking people, and these are like, people who've been in recruitment for a long time. Is like, how do you research when you go to a client? And a lot of people, there's loads of info out there, but you could spend hours. And if you're doing like 5 or 6 meetings a week, you're like, when are you gonna have time to do anything else? But you can literally just put into AI, tell me about this company. What are their biggest challenges? What are their financials like? What do people who have worked there say their culture's like? And you can just get a snapshot of all these things. So in the same way we gave those prompts before, so you can do that really quick research, but still very thorough, to help you get an overview before that interview. So you've got some tools and things to talk. And then also things to delve further into yourself. So it gives you a starting point. And if there's something that's really interesting, you're like, okay, I'm going to spend more time and look into that. I'm going to look on LinkedIn and see who else this might correlate with. Study your own CV. So, you've made this beautiful CV. And going back to Nathan's point, you've made 3 CVs. Make sure you know what's on your CV, because you're going to get asked what's on your CV. So if you're stumped about talking about your own self, that's going to be a challenge in an interview. So make sure you're really clear on what points you've put down. And that's why I say to people, always be honest, because you're going to you'd get found out in a line. It's not going to, either you get the job and you can't do it, or you'll get found out in the interview and then they'll be like, oh my goodness, that was a dishonest person. So, always be honest. Of course, you can give it a bit of, jazz it up a bit, but be honest with what's on there. So it will help you as well when you're prepping for an interview, because you know your own background, you know your CV, know what achievements and bits you put on there, because naturally that's what they're going to ask you about. So if you've put, I've reduced, I'm going to use my industry, like time to hire with a business from 1 week to 3 days, I'm just making random stats up. They're going to go, okay, how did you do that? And if you don't know, or you didn't do it, your friend did it, but you were kind of next to them when they did it, it's going to show up in that interview. So make sure you are really clear on what's on your CV, because they're likely to form some of the talking points in that interview. Study the job spec. We've also shown how you can do it in AO when you're actually looking to see if you want to apply. You can do it in the same way when you are in your interview, so it can draw out elements for you. And then, we were talking about this, a very good point. Make sure you know what the interview format is, because not every business interviews the same way. So you can't be preparing blindly. So you are well within your rights. It's a very normal and reasonable question, whether you're going through an agency or directly with a business, to ask them, great, so excited I've been invited for an interview. Could you please tell me what the interview format is? Because otherwise you can be preparing one thing and it's not what you're going to be doing, and then you're stumped, and it's not that you couldn't have done a good job, but you just weren't prepared for what they were going to ask you or the way they were going to ask it. So absolutely ensure that you know what the format of the interview is and the whole process, because some will, and I think Brother Rogers put some bits in this later down the line, they'll have different processes, so we'll touch on that later. Dress code, really important. Especially, I'd say, for the youth, I would say it's always better to be overdressed than underdressed. Don't take a risk if you're not sure. Give your best self, because there have been times when people have turned up and they are in trainers and jeans and a shirt, and I've had this for like a senior management role. They've gone to interview and they're a bit like, the whole of the office is dressed in suits, and they've just rocked up really casual, and it's like, going back to what Pastor Yaffa said, you're always trying to put your best foot forward. So you want to make sure that you're not giving them any reason to discount you. Now, I know sometimes suits, etc., are expensive, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a suit, but have a nice shirt, some trousers, some good shoes. You can borrow some, let us know. People will be able to make sure for that day that you are dressed and equipped, so you're going in there looking like you belong and like you deserve that job. So don't let that be an obstacle for you. Make sure that you know what the dress code is and that you're prepared accordingly. And then plan your route, because being late to an interview is not a good look either. So make sure that you have done your research, and also do the route. So on Google, you can do the route in the time that you will be traveling. So too often people have looked at routes and they've gone, oh, it's 35 minutes, but you're looking on a Saturday. If you go in, your interview's Monday morning, it's not going to be that time. So you can change Google to put the time and day you will actually be traveling, and it will give you a more real update on how long it will take you and the different routes available. So just make sure that that's part of your prep. And then they're late for an interview. This is the thing. You've got to live and breathe your CV. You can't be saying you're really great at time management. And you're like, oh, well, I didn't check the route when I came, so sorry I'm late. And you're all flustered, and they're like, it's your CV. So, yeah, it's a very good point. Live and breathe what's on there. So who has ever done competency-based questions? Has anybody done that for an interview before? I was going to say, I know Pastor. Yeah.
It's not the only way that people interview, but it is a very common way of interviewing. And I would say actually, prepping for this style, even if it's not a competency-based interview, will help you give a full answer. So in my head, I always have STAR, that's the acronym, right? So it stands for situation, task, action, results. So I'm going to give you a really made-up example to demonstrate each step. So let's say, I'm going to use an engineering example. I'm interviewing for a process engineer role, which is a role where you'll support people across the operation in driving process improvement. You're a link between the operation and the engineering team, right? So a bit of technical context. So if I've been asked, can you give me a time where you've driven improvement on a project that really felt like it was overreach? So I go, right, situation. What's the starting point? Because if you don't set the scene, like, it's really hard to understand whether someone's done a good job or not. So I could say, right, there was this project I was asked to deliver. It was to try and strip out 10 minutes from this 45-minute process that we ran. So that's the situation. It only needs to be one sentence. That's not the longest part of the answer. It's just a starting point. And the task, it buddies on nicely to that. So that was that little bit I did there, which was I had to get it down by 10 minutes, 45 to 30 minutes, right? So the action, that's the biggest part of your answer. So I say the key things that need to go in there is how you went about it, who you worked with, and how you monitored it. Those are key stages in any answer that are going to and also that you could repeat that again if you were in their business. So for the process engineer example I could go, right, so I had to do some line analysis to see all of the stages in that process to understand why it took 45 minutes. What I had to do was identify any elements of that process that actually were unnecessary or could be done differently. Some products from across the factory over to there in every process. So what I simply did was move that station from there to there, and it cut out 10 minutes. And what we did is we monitored that for 3 weeks across 2 shifts, and we were able to see consistently that we got it down for 10 minutes. And that's the action leading to the result. And what I tend to get in feedback from clients is the answers weren't detailed enough. Because what people do sometimes, they go, yeah, I've done that loads of times. I got it down here and here and here. And they're like, okay, but how? That you've got to really spend more time going through the how so they can understand that you know and could do it again in their business and it wasn't a bit of a fluke. So there are different ways that you can like practice that, and I would encourage you to practice that and try and do those. And interestingly, I think it will be on another slide, but my sister-in-law was saying this to me the other day, and I've never tried this, never done it, but you can enable the voice element of AI, and you can do like a dummy interview with it, which is creepy but really clever. Like, so if you can say, can you like help me do some competence-based questions on X, Y, Z, so you can do some practice in front of the mirror before you're going in and just get comfortable with answering things in that sort of way. But even if it's not a competency-based question, I think that framework's really useful because you're giving enough detail and you're showing the impact that you had. So I'd get used to that because I think it's a really good way of giving a full answer. Sorry, go back to that last bit. One thing that is also important to know is if you are okay to say, have I answered your question fully at the end of a question? Have I given you a complete answer? Are you comfortable with the answer that I've given? Because it gives you an opportunity to add some extras and also to make sure that you're almost getting some live feedback. So even if they're like, oh, actually, we didn't, had some questions about this. The next question they ask you, you're going to make sure that you answer that bit fully, right? So you're almost learning throughout the interview process to make sure you're giving yourself the best chance.
Let me just quickly jump in.
Of course, jump on in.
When it comes to answering competency-based questions,
back, please. Yeah.
You could prepare or practice in advance so you don't go in completely blind because it can get you a bit flustered. The what I would say is, if you look at the job advert, you would see elements like, okay, somebody who is, effective at maybe time management. So straight away, a question could be, can you demonstrate when you've applied effective time management skills? So straight away, you can practice for this even before you go for that interview. So have a look at the job description and you can practice some of these competency-based questions before you get it.
No, that's brilliant. And genuinely, I would encourage you to do that. Have some examples ready, and there will be key themes. And if you've got those key elements that are important in that job spec, the likelihood is the questions will be around those things. So you have a few examples ready. So you think, if they were to ask me about time management, I know I'm going to use this example. If they were to ask me about saving costs, I'm going to use this example. They're asking me about keeping a customer happy, I'm going to use this exact example, so that you don't go in there and you're thinking, the moment they ask you a question, which one I'm going to do? So that's a really good point, thank you. Great, so interview itself then, certain tips I would go for is listen. So at some point we might do an active listening series, because I think that's a whole thing in itself, and I have to teach people this a lot. Listen to hear, not to respond. So when someone is talking, actually pay attention to what they're saying, because there's instances where I've been interviewing people and they're answering the question that they want to answer, and you're like, that's not what I've asked you. It's like, because they're so prepared, they've gone too far the other way. In their head, they've already decided what questions are coming up. And it's like, okay, so what my question was, so just really listen to what's coming in, and also listen for little hooks and things that they say that you might want to include in another answer. So really listen to hear, not to respond. Absolutely. Absolutely. Waffle. Yeah. Yeah. Your brain's like, so what am I cooking for dinner when I get home? It's true. Mm. Yeah. Definitely. Thank you for that. And yeah, absolutely. And I think it might be in a later slide, but it's okay to pause. It's okay to ask them to repeat the question. It's much better for you to take that time for you to waffle, because again, common feedback that I get is they talked a lot, but they didn't say much. And it's like, you don't want to be that person. So take your time, listen, respond accordingly. Remember the job spec. So you've done all this prep on the job spec. The answers that you give should be like, how am I selling myself against this job? So make sure that you are relating your examples to the things in the job spec, because, there's probably loads of examples you can give, but you've got to select the right ones that are relevant for that job, for that business. So just make sure you've got the job spec in your mind when you do that. And give a variety of examples, because if all of your examples are about one role, one business, and I mean, if you've only had one role business, that's fine. But if you've got the breadth of experience, then select some from different to show that you've done it in multiple businesses and that you're able to transfer your skills in different settings. So just try and give a bit of variation in some of those examples. But don't forget to ask questions, right? So there will 9 times out of 10, they will ask you if you've got any questions. And if they don't, still ask questions. But you've got to ask something insightful. I'll never forget, we had a bit of a story from a client who, when they said, do you have any questions? And the candidate had gone to him, yeah, how many sick days do you have? That's not a question you need to be asking an employer. That is not a question that you need to be asking an employer. Instantly they're thinking, oh my gosh, they're already planning how long they're going to be off sick days. Your question should be, again, selling you. So there's 3 things I'd say it's worth having a question prepared on. One, about the company. So it could be like with your little chat GPT, but you've got, I saw that your company's had a record year in the past 2 years. What would you attribute that to? Like, it's a really easy and broad question, but it's like, oh, you've done a bit of research. Oh, I see that in the job it talks about progression and taking on more responsibility. Like, how soon would you be willing to give someone more responsibility? Again, it shows you're interested in the future of the business. And about the interviewer, like, I've seen on LinkedIn that you've been here 10 years. It's great. Like, what's kept you here so long? So try and have one in each of those camps already, because you've got an opportunity to show genuine interest and also, again, show that you're the right person for that business and the right person for that job. But I would also say, remember, it's also a chance for you to figure out if that company's right for you. So if you hear a lot of red flags in that meeting, I mean, still give your best foot forward. But when you go away and you know you've got actually another interview tomorrow or next week, and that one's much better, you can rank in your head, really, I want that other job, because there might be some things that they say that you're like, oh, that's not what I found in my research, or I don't enjoy. So make sure you bank that, because it's as much you trying to figure out if that company and role is right for you. And, you know, be really honest. If you get to the point where you've gotten, you know, we trust God that you'll have multiple options, you can then go back and, you know, give some feedback, or you can, you don't have to say, I've taken another job, that's fine. But in your head, going back to those core values that you had before, don't compromise your core values, because they want you. It doesn't necessarily mean that you should want them. So really make sure you've got those core values in the back of your mind with what they're saying, and making sure that it still aligns. So a few little bits of interview best practice, which is eye contact, posture. I'm a fidget, right, as you probably can tell. So I'm like really hot if I'm meeting someone new, or I'm, you know, sit up, focus, because I want to be like leg under here, or like sprawled over there, or I'm tapping something. So, but those things are all really distracting in an interview. So really just try and keep the focus on you and them and the words that you're saying. You know, smile. A warm welcome, a warm hello, like, good to meet you, thank you for the opportunity. Smile, give them a handshake, be positive and confident. I had someone asked me the other day, like, how do you answer the what's your biggest weakness question, which sometimes gets thrown out in interviews? And I said, you've got to be honest to a degree, but you've got to find a positive spin on it. That's it. So, for instance, if it was me, sometimes used to be a bit of a control freak, I'd be like, right, so how am I going to spin that into it? So sometimes I find that, you know, really, I sign myself up for a lot because I really want to get involved. But what I've learned is, actually, we're a team. So there's some things that other people can do and play to their strengths, and I'll play to my strengths. As long as we get the job done, the common goal, that's my main concern. So you can find a way to spin it, but you can't be going in there berating yourself in an interview, because they're like, well, if you don't like yourself, then I don't like you. So you've got to make sure you're speaking confidently and positively about yourself, and also about your future employers, because, your previous employers, because, you know, and if you've had a bad experience, you've had a bad experience, but there's also a way to deliver that. You can't go in there and start bad-mouthing a business and all, because they're thinking, well, who knows, you might be the problem, you don't know. So you need to have like a delicate way of saying that. You could say, look, the culture wasn't quite right there for me. That's fine. You don't have to go, oh my gosh, you'll never guess what the boss used to say, how this is up to me. They used to think that I'm there, you know, they're not paying me. You can't be doing any of those sorts of things, right? So don't get comfortable. Just keep it positive, keep it confident. Calm and clear. So again, what we said, don't fall in the trap of using loads of jargon, loads of filler words. Like, it's better to pause than to say and like and stuff. Do you know what I mean? You know, all those things, they can become distractions from what you're actually saying. So just take your time, breathe, make sure you're deliberate with your words, and that you're really clear, and things don't get lost in translation. So be responsive, that active listening thing I was talking about, like actually respond to what they say, not to what you want to hear. And I find mirroring them and body language is really important. So as an example, you know, like, everyone's different. Some people are just really chatty, and I'll use my sister-in-law as an example. What you guys have met her, so it's the one that came to Pastor's Barbecue and that was here for International Day. So she's quite an introvert naturally, but oh my gosh, in interviews she's like But she's mirroring the energy of the person, right? So if somebody comes across as, oh, good to see you, you're like, oh, great to see you as well. You can't be like stiff-faced, but they're smiling at you, saying, great to see you, and like, oh, I'm just not that guy. I don't look. You just need to try and mirror that energy. Make sure you build a rapport and a connection with that person. Also, on the flip side, you know, someone like me with my extra self, if someone is very introverted and they're like, hi, great to meet you, I'll be like, oh, great to meet you too. I'm not going to be like, oh, give me a hug. You know, you can't do that because it's overstepping boundaries. So just try and mirror the person that's in front of you. So yeah, just bear that in mind. Mirror their energy, mirror their body language. And then don't be afraid to pause, which is what we were saying before, you know, or ask them to repeat a question. That is fine. It's better you give your best answer than you just waffle and give the incorrect or irrelevant answer. And show your personality, you know, whatever it is. No one's asking you to be like fully performative the whole time. Like really try and get across, because I think it's important that people do know who you are and that you actually connect with you. Because also what did the job specific law said? When she turned up week 1, they were like, quite different, aren't you, from your interview? She's like, yeah. it's like, but you know, they were fine. They liked the person that was there, but you also don't want to like misrepresent yourself. You want to give some of your true personality and style in snippets, you know, in moderation. Ask insightful questions, so we had a bit of an idea of the sorts of things to ask, and thank them for their time. You know, if they are busy people, they've taken the time to meet you. Acknowledge that at the end of the meeting, at the start of the meeting, like, thanks so much for this opportunity, thanks so much for your time, goes a long way. And you can follow up with that in an email afterwards. You know, thank you so much for the opportunity. I look forward to hearing feedback. And then also, you know, if they aren't, sorry, yeah, go on, Chidima. Yeah. So that's a really good question. And do you know what? We have a tell for that. Yeah. You want to know, yeah. So for me, if I really like somebody that I'm interviewing, I find myself selling our business to them. So if I'm there like, and I'm like, do you know what you've mentioned here? Guess what? We do this and as well as we're doing this. Oh, it's great you said that's important, because I'm thinking, I want to hire this person. So I'm like, come on, let's get some bits out. So that's one of the telltale signs that we have in our business. We start to like sell the business to them. But I think also interviewers are different. So not everybody will do that. Some might say, oh, that was a great answer. You know, they might actually verbalize that, which, you know, gives you that encouragement. But it does differ from interviewer to interviewer. Some people don't give anything away because they don't want to be unfair, or they don't want to give people false hope, particularly if they've got 3 or 4 people to see. They might like you, but they might think, oh, well, we don't know what the next person's going to be like, so I don't want to say. But there have been some interviews where I've had where they've said to people, we'll definitely be inviting you for an interview afterwards. So if they're confident, they'll say that. But sometimes because they're unsure or other people have to also be part, they'll just reserve. And it doesn't mean it's a negative. It just means they're very careful about putting things out there just in case. So does that answer your question? Yeah. And then, yeah, don't be afraid to chase feedback, because if they've told you, and this is the thing, if they've given you timelines, so don't be like messaging them the next day and be like, when am I getting feedback? Because that's probably not a good look. But if they say, okay, we'll have feedback for you within the week or by next week Friday, great. Next week Friday passes, you can absolutely drop an email and say, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I'm sure you're busy, but I just wanted to know when I can expect feedback and if the timelines have now changed. That's very fair, very reasonable thing to ask. Sometimes you just need a prompt, because sometimes people message me, I'm like, oh my goodness, I haven't come back to that person. Yes, it is good news, but so it's all within your rights. And I think also it demonstrates your tenacity as a person. It demonstrates that you have conviction. It's a good trait to be able to follow up and see things through. So don't be afraid to do that. I'm going to go on. Oh my goodness, I did not fan you with an interview. Many times we listen to the young people speak and we hear you speak this way, not we try to tailor. It's a very good point. Get that out of your vocabulary, because that's some of the put an AI prompt in it, and when I ask the question, they say, sorry, could you repeat the question? And then the AI is asking the question, and then you see their eyes shift, and they're reading, and then they answer me. Yeah, fantastic. So we need to use AI ethically, and just don't get, because if you go on YouTube or you go on TikTok, you see people are actually giving you all the hacks of this what to do. Don't get drawn into that AI hack, because the interviewer can quickly, oh, I know when you wrote using ChatGPT, you know, I know, I've done it. Got your radar. So it's very easy to pick that out. So use it as a starting point, and don't get carried away thinking you're too smart. Nothing you're doing that no one has done before. That's very good advice. It's so good because, and businesses now are getting more savvy with it, so they are checking and they're looking at it, and they want to see, they want a real person. They want to know who you are. So set yourself up for success. Use it as a starting point, not as your crutch. Like, you shouldn't be relying on it. It'll help you start, and then you put your own effort in. You put your own flair on things. Put it in your own language and shape things up. But yeah, absolutely, don't get 100% reliant on it, because it won't bode you well. And also you get this interview and then you've forgotten everything you said because AI prompted you day one. So you said, have you seen those it's going viral on TikTok, and it's like, when you said you were good number cruncher in your interview, and then they're turning up and they've said it not knowing what they are, and then they've got like numbers and they're eating it, and it's like, you can fake an interview, you can get a job, but can you do the job? Is it what you want? Are you equipped? So make sure actually you're using all these tools to upskill yourself, not to just pretend and then not develop yourself in any way. Great. So, sorry, go back. Yeah, thanks. So we're just gonna have a quick break, have a drink. If anyone needs to toilet, we'll have an opportunity for questions. What I want you to do is, yeah. It's a very good point. In every interview situation, and often I'll have feedback from businesses, and they'll go, yeah, they gave textbook answers, but they didn't feel like there'd be a culture fit because it felt rehearsed. So if you don't seem genuine or authentic in that answer, I remember, so I found the other day the notes that I made for my interview with where I work, which was 14 years ago, and I'd come in after uni, right? And I did a lot of prep, so I was like, I don't even know, maybe it was still in, research mode from uni. I did a lot, I found these notes and I had star written out and all these things. So one of the first interviews I had was a telephone interview. And I remember giving all the textbook answers, and the guy said to me, Your answers were great. I mean, you didn't really show much of yourself. We will invite you to the next stage, but I just wanted you to bear them. I said, thank you for the feedback. So when I turned up, you can imagine they were like, what is this person? I was like, hi, everyone. And I was like, because actually I dialed myself down, focusing so much on the answers that almost cost me an issue because I was so like robotic in what I was saying because I was reading and so actually like, showing your personality, showing your genuine desire to want there, that eye contact, that body language, all of that, that's also what they're assessing you on. So your words may be perfect, but if there's a disconnect, it might still not get you where you want to go. So I just want everyone to get a little bit, uncomfortable, and let's just ask each other some questions. Based on what you've heard today, I'd like you to ask somebody a thoughtful, original career question, and then also be prepared to answer one. Okay, so we're just going to have a little 5 to 10 minute break. So what time are we on now? Yeah. So, at 5 past, come back. And I want a few people to share what they asked and what was answered. So after this, then it's the pivot element. So then I'll jump into the AI bits, but I'll let you say first. I'll have a bit of a question. Want a drink?